Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. The NOAA Central Library is excited to bring you How Does the Recent Passage of the Government Open Data Act Impact NOAA? Our speaker is Ed Kearns. He's down in Asheville and ready to go. So I'll turn it over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Katie. Hopefully you all can hear me okay, and hopefully you're able to get to Google Calendar, which I understand has been up and down the last hour. If you weren't able to get to it, you're not listening to this, so that's okay. So we'll go ahead and talk about today about some of the impacts of the Government Open Data Act on NOAA. So within the new law called the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018, that I'll call from here on out, for the sake of brevity, the Evidence Act. There's 4 titles in that new law that was signed in January. The second title is the Government Open Data Act, and that's what we'll be focusing on today, and what NOAA is going to have to do to comply with that law. Also mention some related activities that are to that Government Open Data Act. In particular, there's a cross-agency priority goal, CAP goal, out of the White House called Leveraging Data as a Strategic Asset, and it is synced up with the Evidence Act. And we'll talk about the Federal Data Strategy that has just been recently published, and the Year 1 Action Plan that is out in draft form for comment right now. And I'll just mention also too how we're addressing this with the development of a NOAA Data Strategy. So the Evidence Act, as I said, was passed into law on January 14th, 2019. For those of you who like trivia, it was a chance for a pocket veto, which doesn't happen very often in the federal government. But the president signed the bill on the last afternoon of the last day that he possibly could have, and so it is law now. It takes effect by July 13th, just next month, and we're still waiting on OMB guidance for implementation. But you can go read the law whenever you like. It's out there for everybody to see. There were many different versions of this bill floating around and of the Government Open Data Act over the last couple of years, as many of you are aware, but this is the one that passed. The Evidence Act itself requires a few things here. What the first title requires is 23 CFO Act agencies, which includes the Department of Commerce, to do a few things, including adopting what are called learning agendas into the strategic planning process. This is actually going to be discussed at the upcoming IT security workshop. A fellow from USAID, the CDO, is coming over to talk about how they've done that at their agency. A little shout out there for the IT security workshop. This is coming up soon. And OMB is going to be doing a few things too, and one of the most important things is the creation of a Chief Data Officer Council. So at the White House level, they'll be talking about data and data governance and data as an asset, and so that's a first for the U.S. government. So that's very significant. And what we'll be talking a lot about today in the second title is the Government Open Data Act. Within the Evidence Act, a few new roles are defined, including the role that I'm playing right now for NOAA, a Chief Data Officer, Chief Evaluation Officer, and a Designated Statistical Officer are all now required at CFO Act agencies. And they're not political positions. They're senior career employees for the CDO and the Evaluation Officer. The Statistical Officer could be a political appointee, but it's left, the law is silent on that fact. So it leaves a little bit of latitude for the agencies to figure out how to accomplish that. The Evidence Act also assigns to the new CDO role many responsibilities that are now held by the CIO, including the Paper Reduction Act and data collection activities. Archive and preservation of data is now the responsibility of the CDO. The Government Open Data Act itself is very consistent with where previous law has come from. What a data asset is defined in the Freedom of Information Act that we've all been working with for quite some time. What federal data assets are now required by law to be is open by default. So of course there can be exemptions for confidentiality or business reasons, or these are well-established reasons why you can't share data. But the trick here is that they're open by default, and then you have to defend why you can't share them. fact that we're going to have to share our data now under an open license, no longer under the public domain as we've been doing at NOAA for many years. Now we need to have an explicit open license, and this will address a lot of concerns our data users have, particularly on the international level, where public domain doesn't mean in Europe what it means here in the United States. And our data are to be published as machine readable. Every agency also has to maintain a comprehensive data inventory. And by comprehensive, you see that's the words underlined here, not data inventory, because comprehensive means not just our environmental data, but our programmatic data and our business data and our spending data. Everything that we've got is actually defined as a data asset. And we have to have an inventory of all that. We have to establish data governance structures and also publish information strategy, which includes an explicit open data plan. So some of the particular ways that this impacts NOAA are listed here. I just mentioned in the first bullet here that a lot of our performance spending, programmatic data, not as easy to get to as our environmental data. NOAA has been a leader in open data for many years, sets the standard across government. Quite frankly, NOAA is widely respected for all the hard work that you all on the phone have done for decades, and that's great. But we've also set a standard that now we need to meet with our other data that is harder to get to. The way that we're governing our data right now, we're doing it in a very distributed manner. It's usually left to the line offices and to programs to govern their own data, and there's some oversight provided by the Environmental Data Management Committee and the NOSC to some degree, but it's really not in a highly coordinated fashion right now in a strict data governance sense, and so there may be more coordination, maybe some constant consolidation of responsibilities may be necessary to meet the OMB standards. The way that I just mentioned too, the way that we're distributing data in public domain, once we start to apply some proper licenses on our code, our documentation, as well as our data, then we'll be in good shape. I know a lot of you are already applying open licenses to your code on GitHub and others, for example. Sometimes we haven't endorsed a license yet. Some of the licenses we're using right now, quite frankly, we're not allowed to use because we require distribution under some of those, or attribution, sorry, under some of those licenses, and strictly speaking, federal employees can't do that. So we'll have to find a set of licenses that will meet our needs and also are legal. And access to our data. So we're supposed to keep track of who's using our data, where the data are going. We do that to some degree across our organization right now, but it's not necessarily very well coordinated all the way across the organization. So we'll probably have to up our game there as well. There's also an opportunity for non-open data that I'll mention here for those of you from fisheries in particular that are listening in today. There's the third title in the Evidence Act gets to provisions about tiered access and how confidential data can be shared but also be protected. And there's a group of statistical agencies that's called SIPC that have been around for many years, and NOAA has not been part of the SIPC group. But there is now an opportunity to become a SIPC group if we wanted to do so. And of course, the upside of this is that gaining experience about how other statistical agencies protect and share their data. These are things that NOAA can use to help share its data that are not open. And of course, the big upshot there is there's of course value in those data to others, and if we can share them in a consistent and legal and protected way, then we have the potential to realize that value. That's also included in the Evidence Act. So what does this all mean for NOAA? So I'd say there's no reason to be alarmed. For the main part is that the Evidence Act is reinforcing a lot of the practices that NOAA has actually pioneered. And a lot of the practices that NOAA has put into place over the last few years, since the last administration, when certain executive memos came out and executive orders came out, such as PAR, such as M1313, all these executive orders were talking about publishing our data in open ways, machine readable ways. The Evidence Act codifies all this. So rather than these things being in somewhat ephemeral executive orders and OMB memos, now this is law. And so all those investments that NOAA has put into, particularly over the last 5 years, we put a lot of investment into open data and these, and these practices we were just mentioning. All those investments are safe. They're going to pay off because now this is the law of the land, and we're going forward. So I'd say, yeah. So this is actually a cause for celebration. The passage of the Evidence Act. We should be celebrating this in NOAA. It's underscoring the way that we're rolling already, and that's wonderful to see. But yes, there is work to do. There's always work to do. So things to do. Here's a couple of near-term things that the law requires, and frankly, this same list applies to the Department of Commerce mainly, and then it is expected that these same things are going to apply to NOAA. I say expected because we still don't have OMB guidance on this, and we still don't have DOC guidance on this. So we'll still have to listen to the department coming up. We may have some flexibility from the department in some of the dates, perhaps, but OMB is holding pretty hard on the dates for the department here. So near term, we're supposed to appoint a chief data officer, an evaluation officer, and a designated statistical official. We've already got a CDO. We're ahead of the game there. I've been in this job for about 2 years, so NOAA is proactive and ahead of the game again on that one. Create a comprehensive data inventory. Many of you already participate in the environmental data inventory that we've been running for a couple of years here. That will probably be enough to answer the mail in the short term, but again, bringing in those other data sets is going to end up being a priority. Medium term, a little bit further out, having to develop a learning agenda. I know over the CFO shop, they are actually already working on these kinds of things. Again, being very proactive and being ahead of the curve. Constituting a data governance council. Again, so we do have some committees and some councils that worry about data governance now, but operationally, that's, it depends. So I think we're going to have to describe our data governance structure a little more succinctly for the department and for OMB, but we can do that. Create an open data plan. I think we have a de facto one out there, but we can weave some of these elements into an open data plan. And probably the one that may be the hardest one, along with learning agenda, but maybe the capacity assessments might be the next hardest thing to put together quickly in the next fiscal year. So this is looking at how much data NOAA has, how much we can handle, what our labor is to handle these things. Are we accomplishing the stewardship that we need to? Do we, what are some of our gaps in our data science capabilities, maybe to back this stuff up? So all these kind of capacity assessments and maturity assessments are going to be coming along with that as well. So it'll be a busy fall and springtime. So while this is rolling along as part of that CAP goal I mentioned before of leveraging data as a strategic asset, that the Federal Data Strategy has been developed over the last year. Myself and Kim Valentine from NOS have been participating in this group, putting this together. Again, this is run out of OMB, out of the CIO shop at OMB. The Federal Data Strategy is based upon a couple of these principles: ethical governance, conscious design, and learning culture. And the idea is to bring data to the forefront for federal agencies. Federal Data Strategy also has, in addition to the principles, has 40 practices that were published last month. These you can go to strategy.data.gov and check them out. The work that NOAA has done, quite frankly, has informed a bunch of those practices. NOAA's, as Kim Valentine will also tell you, NOAA's practices came up quite a bit in these discussions and these working groups, putting together these 40 practices that make up the Federal Data Strategy. So that's also great to note. Where the rubber hits the road for the Federal Data Strategy is something called an annual action plan. And this is those activities that agencies are expected to complete every year, and this should be changing every year. And there's a year one action plan actually out on the street now. So it was just released a couple days ago and is out for public comment and federal comment until the 5th of July. So and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a second here, but there's 16 action steps that are proposed in this draft form. It also says what's supposed to be measured and when these things are going to be due and who is responsible for completing them. So because there's a chance for response, this is a chance that NOAA can get our comments in to actually help shape that plan so that we can make sure that we are successful in meeting it. What the draft Year 1 action plan looks like, here's a list of actions. Hopefully you can see this here. There's 16 different things that are being asked to do. Some of these are being already prescribed to certain agencies. Some of them actually have money and activity already going on behind it. Some of them, like the artificial intelligence and the geospatial information actions, are already coordinated through the AI group at OSTP and the FGDC respectively on those actions. But I want to call your attention to numbers 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Constitute a diverse data governance body, assess data and related infrastructure maturity, identify opportunities to increase data staff's data skills, identify data needs to answer key agency questions, which is basically a learning agenda, and 16, identify priority data sets for agency open data plans. So you'll note that those 5 things I just read off have a lot in common with the Evidence Act requirements. This, as you can imagine, is not coincidental. So there's been an effort at OMB to make sure that the Federal Data Strategy and the Year 1 Action Plan are in coordination with the Evidence Act and the actions that NOAA and other agencies are going to have to undertake. So that's good. We're in coordination. So what are the next steps for the Federal Data Strategy? As I said, the action plan, the Year 1 action plan, is out for comment right now. And there's a couple of different opportunities to get your comments in. We have an action out through the EDMC right now to collect NOAA's feedback so we can have a combined response. The hope that it's going to have as much weight as possible with the department and with OMB. But there's a GitHub page, there's an online form at strategy.data.gov, there's a notice in the Federal Register. Everybody's invited to respond however they see fit. I'd recommend going through your line office rep on the EDMC or staff office rep on the EDMC to get your comments in with everybody else so we can put it in together. But definitely OMB is seeking your feedback. The whole Federal Data Strategy has been developed in this fashion. This is the 3rd time they've put out documentation out for public comment and federal comment, and they have every time they have changed the document, changed the policies to meet the expressed needs that they've heard through the process here, the comment process. There's also a forum, 2 forums actually. One for feds only. It'll be at the Department of Commerce next Tuesday on the 25th, starting either like around 9 or 10 o'clock. We don't have an exact schedule yet, but there's a page that you can go register to attend on that. I think we've got about 120, 130 people already registered. It'll be in the auditorium in Commerce. And if you'd like to speak, you can ask to get 5 minutes to express your views to the whole audience there. Similarly, on the 8th of July, there will be a public forum. And I'm not quite sure if they get the venue set up there yet, but I'll pass it along when I find out for sure that it's in the right place. But yes, same deal, that if you ask to be for a speaking role there, for a member of the public, industry is already signing up quite a bit, as you can imagine. They've already got a couple hundred people signed up already for the public forum, and so it's a chance for the public to speak their mind, and Federal Data Strategy team and OMB is listening. Something else that's going on that we had started this year through a team that includes Kim Valentine and Matt Austin from NESDIS, and Nancy Ritchie from NESDIS, and Jason Cooper from NESDIS, has been a NOAA Data Strategy. This NOAA Data Strategy is coordinated again with the Federal Data Strategy, and the idea is again to lay a foundation for those things that we can agree on across our organization, to provide a firm basis that we can then move forward. Maybe this be part of some of the deliverables that we bring forward for OMB. But the idea here is that, it's sort of like mom and apple pie kind of things for those of you that are living this day in and day out. But this is what this group has been socializing across multiple committees and councils across NOAA right now. Supposed to be like a grassroots effort to bring this forward. And the ideas here, the four main ideas that the data strategy is bringing forward is to govern and manage the data strategically, to share the data as openly and widely as possible, to promote data innovation and quality improvements, and to honor stakeholder engagement and to leverage our partnerships. All of this is all towards maximizing the value for science, for the value of NOAA's data for the nation, including our economy, and to do as good a job as we can with our data assets. So that NOAA Data Strategy is in draft form right now, and it is being worked through the NOSC, the NOAA Observing System Council. And went out as an action 2 weeks ago. Kim Valentine was there to brief the NOSC, and that is where we are getting official feedback from the line offices and staff offices. And so, we're happy to share a copy of that with you. And if you would send your comments on the NOAA Data Strategy draft up through your NOSC representatives, then we can make sure that all of your comments and thoughts are adjudicated. The idea is to have, one common document, one common vision. Is in coordination with what's happening at the department level and at the White House level, and also going to facilitate our work going forward. So once we get the strategy document in place, then when it comes next, of course, there's a lot of other things coming next. Various roadmaps, including the omics roadmap that's out there for the Research Council. You've seen that; it's very exciting work. There's a lot of stuff going really fast with AI right now, as many of you are aware of. All sorts of activities going on across NOAA with that. The cloud, lots of stuff going on with cloud too. And the thought here is that having agreement on our basic principles for how we're handling our data will help inform these activities as we go forward. When we start to have any conflicts or we have to make decisions about how, as an organization, we're going to proceed, these strategic documents like the data strategy, we can come back to and make sure that we are in alignment, that our decisions are in alignment with what we've all agreed to are our principles and guiding strategies. And then, of course, going forward in implementation, there's going to be a whole lot of work to go. And as you all know, in the data world, this work never stops. It continues on, cycles on, and that's a good thing. That's where the value comes from. And next up, I think I didn't talk too long, and hopefully we have some times for comments or questions.
Yes, thanks, Ed. I can read off the questions from the online audience. The first question is, NOAA produces a great deal of environmental measurements and model output. Does anyone at NOAA have a comprehensive inventory of the data that we produce and what happens to the data afterwards? Not all the data is archived at NCEI.
I don't think anybody has a comprehensive inventory yet. We have, I think, 93,000 data sets registered in OneStop right now, which is the new catalog that NESIS is running going forward. But then Fisheries has their own catalog, own realization of that. The modeling community itself has a huge inventory of data. In fact, at any given day, we've got probably over 200 petabytes of data residing somewhere on NOAA system, as far as I can tell right now. Probably 90% of that is within the numerical weather modeling community. It's hard to move that data around. So nobody has a picture of everything just yet. And like I said, the harder thing is going to be getting that programmatic and spending and financial data, which has typically been well stewarded, but in a completely different system.
Okay, thank you. Another question was, it was noted that we should track who is using our data. How can we track end users, since this person thought that it was a violation of our privacy policies?
That is an excellent question. It is not in violation of our privacy policies as long as we follow the right processes. And so there are processes that are established and that we follow every day. And we just need to ask, and we need to fill out the right forms. We are a bureaucracy. register those forms with the Office of Management and Budget, and then we can collect that information. So I have seen this often across NOAA, where there's been we're aware that we have to be very careful about how we collect information. That is absolutely right, and I really appreciate that when people are being careful about that. But what we can't do is let that those privacy considerations completely stop us. It just is going to have to change the way that we collect that information. And across the federal government, particularly the last 5 years, there's been a lot of progress on methods and ways of collecting this information in a secure way, and excluding information that we should not and could not keep, and just keeping that information that we can find most useful about describing the usage of our data and where it may be going.
Wonderful, thank you. In follow-up, can you define machine-readable data?
Not a PDF. So yeah, so there are some good definitions of machine readable out there. Any of these kind of markup languages, any of these self-describing languages like an SCDF or HDF, these kinds of things. Even CSV files are machine readable. Those qualify. But anything that would require software to go through, like a PDF, that is considered not machine readable. So yeah, so there's quite a bit of latitude there, and there's a couple of working definitions. If you reach out to me, I'm happy to share them with you.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how will this renewed focus on life cycle data management help fisheries address the many siloed databases that limit work across fisheries within a region and between regions that have shared stocks?
Yes, and so the most exciting thing that I've had in the last 2 years in this job as Chief Data Officer, discovering more and more about what's going on in fisheries. I am so excited about the opportunities in fisheries to do exactly what the question is asking, about how to bring these data together, so everybody can do a better job, more efficient job. There's huge opportunities within fisheries. Just the realization hit me about a year ago that fisheries will have more data than any other line office in probably another year or two. Mainly to a lot of the genomics work that's going on and video work that's going on. There's tremendous value there. And I think some of the practices that we'll be talking about with data governance and fisheries, I know you're already working on data governance, talk with Frank Schwing and Karen Sender, Nathan Wilson and others. I understand a lot of great work that's going on there. I'm really excited to see where that's going to go. And I think, that the rest of NOAA can actually learn from a lot about how fisheries is approaching this very, very difficult problem. And I don't have all the answers right now, but I think that the slope is good. We're headed in the right direction. And, just the fact that we know that there's so much value in these data, I think we'll continue to have a lot of positive feedback on this as we start to get organized. I think everyone will realize what the value is in keeping this organization activity going and data governance activity going, so that and this is one of the things the data strategy touches on, is that ideally what we want to have is everybody have access to everybody's open data across our organization, and not just within a line office, not just within a project, but everybody, every NOAA employee has access to everybody else's information when they need it. The cloud obviously is a great opportunity from an infrastructure point to help provide those kind of tools, but the behavior of sharing is going to be really important to achieve our mission. And for things like artificial intelligence and machine learning applications, it's absolutely vital to have that kind of instantaneous, ubiquitous access to NOAA data.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more specific questions right now. We do have a comment that the upcoming UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development emphasizes a transparent ocean, and in some countries, open data access is not the same as open data use. And the commenter would like to encourage NOAA using open data access and use to emphasize that there are no restrictions. Some countries offer open access, but limited or restricted use of certain activities.
Yes, that is an excellent point. And one of the things I've learned in my time working with the Federal Data Strategy team, and particularly a lot of agencies, statistical agencies like Department of Education, Health and Human Services, the VA, and others, that the way that we view open data is very different how other agencies view data and openness. And it comes down to the type of data that we have. And so these international concerns about open data are spot on. The United States is leading the way in open data practice and law. And the fact that, yes, by law, there are no restrictions. You can never restrict anybody from how they're going to use your open data and what they're going to do with it. And this is probably one of the biggest questions I get across NOAA when we talk about sharing our data, like through, either our existing portals or practices, or through the Big Data Project, or wherever it might be that we're sharing data with others. One of the biggest questions is, how do I prevent other people from misusing my data? And unfortunately, the answer is you can't stop them. All we can do is we can provide the guidance. We can make sure the quality of the data is high. We can put out the documentation. We can do everything we can. But at the end of the day, the U.S. law says there are no restrictions on the use or reuse of federal data. And that's been a huge boon to our economy. And I think the upsides are way outweigh the downsides on this. But it is an active conversation, and as you mentioned, happening at the international level as well.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question. Do we have a sense of what will be measured in accordance with the FDS, and how actions will trickle down to line offices and staff offices, and when?
Yeah, great question. Exactly what's going to be measured through the Federal Data Strategy Action Plan is still up in the air. And I think the comments, this is a great opportunity to share, to not just share, but to shape the action plan itself, so that we're in some control about answering that question about what we're going to have to do and what we're going to have to measure. The sentiment I've heard at OMB is that there are plenty of required measures and required metrics in the Evidence Act and other law and regulation, and that the Federal Data Strategy aspires to be a little bit, be more of a stretch goal, to be a little bit more aspirational, and look for a little bit more lift beyond just the foundational things. So if you're just meeting your metrics, this is a compliance exercise. We all know what a compliance exercise looks like. It'll only get you so far. OMB realizes this. And what they're trying to build into the action plan are some metrics that are going to encourage agencies to go a little bit further, right? To do a little bit more. For example, if the metric was, how many open data sets are you sharing right now? Like I said, we've got 93,000 in our metric, in our inventory right now. In all of data.gov, there's like less than 300,000. So we're like 1/3 of the total number of open data sets being shared across the U.S. government right now. That would be an easy measure for NOAA to share or to meet. We want to create measures that actually are going to inspire us to do our job even better and bigger. And exactly what those measures are, I'm not sure yet.
Great, thank you. And one more question. How far does the federal nexus extend in determining what data is subject to this policy, i.e. does it extend to any data collected in conjunction with federal spending, federal agencies involved in decision-making for projects that are led by state or private agencies?
Yeah, another great question. So it would include all federal data, excluding classified data. So classified data is off the table. You could have guessed that one. Anytime federal data or federal funding goes to a partner, this also extends to them as well. So it's wherever federal data goes or federal money goes to create federal data, to create federal collections. And so these are some of the big questions going on right now with among our partners about how the Evidence Act applies to them and their activities. And again, NOAA, through a lot of people on this webinar have worked very hard over the last couple of years through the PAR activities in particular to make sure that grantees' data are being delivered back to NOAA and or being shared with the public, so the public has access to those as well. I would imagine kind of doubling down on PAR is where we're going with this, and I think that's good. I think we've already seen a lot of positive feedbacks from those research data that we've been able to make available to the public, and we're going to continue down that path.
Great, thank you. We have a few more questions. Will NOAA try and acquire additional funding to meet these requirements as an agency?
Funding question. That remains to be seen. So one thing that has not been synced up yet at OMB has been the syncing of the federal data strategy with the budget process. So typically every year there will be guidance passed down from OMB and passed down from the Department of Commerce that tells NOAA, hey, this is what you should be working on, this is what you should be asking for money for, right? So so far, everything in the federal data strategy is considered to be executable with your existing funds. We know there's going to be gaps, and so I think this discussion will start probably late for the 2021 budget, but 2022 will probably be their first opportunity to have real budget guidance coming down from OMB. Of course, that's not certain, but whenever OMB is asking for something and Congress is asking for something, this is an opportunity for NOAA to ask for the dollars in order to execute, but it's certainly not a guarantee that we'll get it.
Okay.
And we're obviously not the only agency in that boat. Everybody's in the same boat there.
Okay. You were mentioning an inventory as the environmental data inventory. Is that NCEI, or can you clarify?
Yeah, right now this is a point of discussion at the EDMC. So, what is the official NOAA inventory? Right now it's at data.noaa.gov. It is run by NESIS. It harvests information from across the different line offices into that system, but it is not comprehensive. It is not all inclusive. One Stop is an additional value-added catalog and discovery system that Ken Casey and others have been building over at NESIS, and it serves all NOAA data. Yes, it does. But we have a lot of discussions going on at EDMC right now about how that will be meeting the emerging needs at the different line offices, realizing that there are other requirements, other things out there that we have to make sure we're being inclusive of. But that's the best we got going today.
Great, thank you. And speaking of all of this sharing, will you be sharing your slides, or will the listeners online be able to access these slides after?
Yes, yeah, happy to share them. However we want to get them out there to you, yeah, happy to share them. If you're having trouble getting a hold of them, just send me an email at ed.kearns@noaa.gov. I'm happy to send them to you.
Great, thank you. That is the end of the questions. Do you have anything further you would like to share?
No, I just really appreciate this opportunity. Thanks for reaching out. It's those of you that have been working in the trenches in data and data policy for years know that these things come in fits and starts. Back in 2012, 2013, we had a big pulse of new directives that we got to work on, and it was quiet for a while. Now we have this other big pulse of activity now through the law and other policies. It's an exciting time to be working in data right now. It's wonderful to see value of data being recognized at the White House level, and things like a data governance council being created in the White House. These are really, really positive things. And as I mentioned before, I'm very proud to represent NOAA in this, and to represent all your hard work, and to hear other agencies be in awe of the great work that NOAA folks are doing. You guys are recognized leaders in this area. I just say, please keep up the good work. This is a great opportunity for NOAA to lead on many levels, and I think we should take it. Thank you again. Thanks for the time.
Yes. Thank you.